When I was young, and the Nintendo 64 dominated most of my life outside of school, there wasn't much like the feeling of getting my friends together at my house, turning on the large, aged CRT television in the center of the living room and popping in Smash Brothers on a warm Sunday afternoon. The smell of sweat from the losing players and the wafting odor of what I assume was pure testosterone emitting from the winners. As odd as it sounds describing the smells of body odor describing playing Nintendo 64 with some friends, it was a very comforting smell that reminded you of the imperfection of your peers. It reminded you that we were all in it together, and that never left me. Just the smell of camaraderie being tested by a fighting game. We would get together weekly for some friendly destruction of one another. I always had the console game, and controllers ready. Always lined up by color, 2 gold controllers, a red controller, and a blue controller. My friend Tyler and I always got the gold controllers, and my other friends Matt and Corey fought over who got the red controller. Nobody wanted the poor blue controller. We would get right to selecting characters and showing off all the tricks we found on our own time, like aiming Yoshi eggs, flying Mario with his spin, and using Ness to his best without always relying on PK fire. They were great times. Times I wish I could have again. When Melee came out, we were all psyched to get together and play the brand new fighting masterpiece. We planned a whole weekend party for the new game, where we would get tons of kids to come over and take our group on in a tournament setting in the new GameCube fashion. We ended up only bringing 2 more people over to stay for the big Smash weekend. Obviously, the tournament style play was new to us, and we had a blast with the new characters and speed of play. It was one of the most nostalgic times for me as a gamer. It was also the last time I saw Matt. Matthew had been my first friend when I moved to Alabama in 1996. From kindergarten to 5th grade, we were together all the time. Going to each other's houses, going to each other's parties, and generally going to places together. He was always the first person I would call for spending time with someone. I bring this up because I thought we would be childhood friends forever. I thought he would never leave my side. Then we played that goddamned game. After we woke up on that Sunday after the night of the fun new game, we found Matt shaking in the corner holding his controller, like he had been up all night. We went over to ask what he was doing, but he would only murmur back what sounded like button names. To paraphrase, left B, right A, down A, left tap, B in rapid succession. He rocked slowly while saying all these commands. Corey walked over as the ballsiest of us to try and snap Matt out of it. When he walked over and touched Matt's shoulder, Matt yelped and screamed like he was being tortured. Nobody in the room knew how to react. My mom saw him writhing on the floor while screaming. She covered him with a blanket and took him to the guest room, and she called his parents. We never heard another word from Matt after that. He never called, his parents wouldn't take our calls like they used to, and my mom got all nervous every time I would ask why. I never knew what happened to my friend, but I never saw him at school again, I was never allowed to see him again, and it was like he dropped off the face of the earth. I supposed at the time he was just growing up and having problems with it. I had no reference frame to understand why he did what he did, so I shrugged it off as best I could. Tyler, Corey, and I still spent time together and even played the game, but we never talked about Matt. It was just something weird that happened, and we could deal with it. I'd honestly love to end the story right here, but I can't. I can't say we all lived happily ever after, and that no misfortune would befall us, because it did. In 2008, we were all of high school age, heading off in different directions but still spending what little time we could together, keeping the past in our hearts and trying to remain friends. Corey and I went to the same high school while Tyler went to a rival school, leaving a slight gap in our circle. We were a little distant at the time, but then Super Smash Bros. Brawl appeared, and we knew we'd have to cut corners to spend more time together to experience the new wonder. We got into it immediately. Unlocking all the characters by doing simultaneous playthroughs of the Subspace Emissary on our own time so we could then take on each other with the unlocked characters. It was good for a while until the summer of 2009. By this point, we had been playing Brawl online with each other for quite a while, so we were used to how lag would affect the play, how sometimes the load ball would appear and stay on for a while, so we knew that the game had its limitations, and we accepted it. The game was still fun, and we didn't have to stuff ourselves in our then overcrowded bedrooms to play on our own televisions. The free online play was and is something we took for granted, but now looking back, I see how much the game actually cost me. One afternoon in June 2009, Corey came online in Brawl and hosted a room. He usually would call me or message me to tell me when he wanted to play, but a friend was on and I wasn't going to waste the opportunity to show him some serious Yoshi skills. When we got into the game, he started fidgeting around and messily hitting buttons like he had never played the game in his life, and he was just mashing down every button to see what would happen. He was the best player out of all of us, and he just did a bunch of nonsensical moves and even jumped off the ledge for apparently no reason. After a few games like this, he then just did nothing. He stood there without any controller inputs for about half an hour, so I supposed he had forgot to shut off the Wii when he turned off the television, or he got called away to do something. I didn't think too much of it until the next day. Corey wasn't at school. I asked about him, and nobody knew where he was. I was a bit bummed because I wanted to rag on him about the dreadful playing the night before, but then I was called in to talk to a counselor about something that happened with Corey. He was dead. His whole family was the victim of a violent robbery that ended with the corpses of he and his family strewn across his living room rug. Shotgun wounds drizzling their crimson across the walls. I asked them when they had been murdered, and it apparently was at 2 p.m. on the day before that current school day based on the autopsy results. I told the counselor that this was impossible. I had just played Corey on Smash the afternoon before. I couldn't have been playing someone who's dead. Even though it was morbid and a bit disrespectful, I would joke that the system got haunted by the vengeful spirits of my friend, but I knew in my heart that that was not the case. I knew that I had been playing against the murderer. I had a hard time writing about this. Please try to understand that this isn't some haunted series of supernatural events. These are just people. My friends. My best goddamn friends, and they were taken from me. Tyler and I saw less and less of one another over the years. I had dropped out of college, whereas he has obtained a degree in finance. It made me proud of him, and I really wanted to apologize for not spending a lot of time with him like we used to. At his graduation, as a gift, I got him the new 4th installment of the Smash Brothers series. He was overjoyed, and nostalgically pained about it as I was. We cried and laughed together for the first time in years. He and I played the single player to get all the characters, and we were right back where we used to be. Like kids in a theme park, we stared in awe of the new fun that we were bearing witness to. We got all the characters, and we started getting hardcore about how we would play. We'd set up everything as if we were in a competitive war game. No items, no stage influences, just a fight. When we realized that online play respected this kind of play set up in for glory, we got excited to see how well we would fare. At first, we were pretty bad, but we worked and worked on it, and eventually we could beat people. We were actually having the kind of fun we had as children again. After his graduation party and our newfound interest in the new Smash Brothers, Tyler started to not answer his phone very often. When he does, he'd say that he was in between a match and I'd have to wait to call him back, or he'd get back to me. He didn't. I would call him every day for a week, and he'd answer at most once to tell me how much of a distraction from the game I am, and how I'm the reason he lost. After a while, he never picked up the phone. I thought something was wrong, and I should see for myself what was going on, so I drove over to his house and knocked on the door. He didn't answer. His car was still in the driveway. A cold sweat pierced my dry, clammy skin as I thought about how Tyler was my last friend from childhood who would care to even talk to me, and I didn't know what happened to him. I let myself in through the side window they left unlocked for emergency reasons, and I yelled for anyone to answer me. Nothing but a thick layer of silence and dread was present in the house. I found my way to his room and opened the door. What I saw. I feel like I can't type it. I feel like this part of the story is a dream and I'm just telling you some surrealist horror fantasy. He was sitting at his desk, forehead leaning on the CRT television that displayed Smash Bros. 4's online menu. His eyes were still open. He did not breathe. He was a fresh corpse, and it was not a sight I want to describe. He was sickeningly thin. So thin that the arteries and bones sagged and hung limp as the skin was too wide to naturally hold both. There was no blood. Just a rotting, still staring skinny boy holding a game controller in his hands. Written on the whiteboard beside him were the words, 20 wins in for glory in a row or no food. You know the game. Don't suck. I vomited on the floor and ran out of the house. I told the authorities about his body, but never mentioned that I had been in the house. They had a funeral for him just last week. I don't want this to happen to anyone else. These games cost me my friends that I thought I could grow old with. Instead they were ripped away from me, and I was a witness to it all. I suppose when the next game is released, I'll meet my demise just as my friends did. Matt, if you are still alive, please contact me. I want to know what happened that night at the sleepover. I suppose there's nothing else I can do about this. It was all just for a little game of Smash Brothers.